Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast. We have a pretty awesome episode this week, some really big announcements, some really awesome guests, and some guests that a bunch of you have heard of before. So let's get right into it. This is the Growing with Fishes podcast. We try to do this every week as much as we're able to, and we we will be try to do this every week or every other week, and we try to cover both aquaponic and cannabis topics. That's why we're called Growing with Fishes. I'd like to introduce some awesome people today. Marty's with us here today.
How's it going, guys?
We have Ken Armstrong from Ouroboros.
Howdy. Pleasure to meet you all.
And we have Tony Ralph from Eden here.
How's it going?
Now located out in Eden Art Gardens and the surrounding properties here. We have a couple of big things going on out this way, which we'll get into shortly. Marty, you want to tell us what you've been up to?
Yeah, I've been working on this for quite a while. I mentioned it a couple of times, but everything looks like it's been green lighted, and escrow is going to close on our property for the 9th, and we'll be setting up and applying for all of our tier 1 recreational licensing. So hopefully we'll be setting up a 5,000 square foot indoor and a 20,000 square foot outdoor, just southeast of Portland a little ways. And so probably projecting to get that started around the beginning of February, get the indoor in and going first, and then put everything out for the outdoor. And so that's going to be really exciting, and hopefully getting all that taken care of. And obviously I'll be moving and doing a lot of other things and getting everything set up, but they want me to continue to film everything, and basically they're all about transparency and probiotics and all those different things that we value. And so I'll continue to shoot videos of the initial setup. It's actually, right now, it's a Christmas tree farm. So they have about 49 acres of Christmas trees already existing. And so we'll basically just be expanding it, continue to run the actual Christmas trees, and then add about another half acre of our own Christmas trees. And it's gonna be really a lot of fun, Larry. Looking forward to it, and hopefully you guys will be able to see it. We're gonna set up some cameras and do some time lapses and different things as we set up a full-on commercial grade application. And should be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Are you going to do all aquaponics, or are you just starting off with one and the other?
We're actually going to run the probiotic wellness gardens that we've talked about, like the earth boxes. We're going to run all the flowering plants in those, and then all the mothers and clones and everything will be done in aquaponic systems. So they'll go straight from, they'll get rooted. Once they're rooted in the aquaponic system, then they'll get transferred to the earth box and stay in those the entire time. Everything will be on a rotation. So we will have zero transplant. The earth box is already on casters, so they'll wheel out of the bedroom and wheel into the flower room, and then we'll probably also wheel them out for harvest. So instead of just cutting everything down in the room, we'll pull it all out first, and we're going to have a separate area for harvesting and drying, so that we can bring veg plants in right away. So that's kind of the overall rough plan. So we'll and then sort of the phase 2 plan is to have the full-on flowering aquaponic system, which will sort of be like the private reserve, the slightly more expensive line of cannabis. And we're hoping to have about 10 to 12 strains, kind of a pretty wide menu to shop through as well. So we have a lot of plans, but that's what we're starting out as.
That's awesome. So I guess I'll let Tony go next, and then I'll go, and then we'll leave the floor with our special guest today. Tony, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and what you do here?
Hey guys, how's it going? We're broadcasting live from the living room here, rather the groove room here at Eden Art Garden. Eden Art Garden is a place where we feature an array of different DJs, artists. We feature an array of different educational workshops. We have couple different sustainable technology projects in the works. That's actually how Steve and I got acquainted. Steve is going to be facilitating a lot of the educational workshops regarding the aquaponic farms that we'll be building here. And actually today we've been walking around the property and going over extensive planning for the future, where things are best suited in terms of ideal placement for sunlight and things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, he was kind enough to give me a really amazing opportunity out here. And not only that, he also owns a bunch of property nearby that we're using for some of the other larger commercial aquaponic cannabis clients that we'll be building out down here in Southern California here in the next 6 months or so. We have a couple of big projects that I'll be able to tell you more details about, is the paperwork and everything else, and financing, and all the rest of the details that Marty was just happy to proclaim that he finally got through.
Most of the way through. Don't jinx anything for me, Steve. I'm about 4 days away. All right. So
yeah. So it'll be really cool to see this place, and we'll have a ton of cool video footage. We'll be doing a lot more on fruit trees, as well as a little bit more vegetable stuff on the YouTube channel, aside from the cannabis stuff, especially in the short term. The next couple months will be a little bit more vegetable focused as far as regular daily footage and things like that. So yeah, really excited to have this opportunity. I have an amazing place. Like, the artwork here alone is just incredible. Don't mind the mess, but I mean, every wall, everything is painted in just a super amazing, creative way. And everywhere you look at this place is just inspirational as far as artwork and creativity and gardening and everything else. And I don't know, happy to show it off and do a lot of different things with the space. So
yeah, it looks like an
also,
awesome setup there.
Also wanted, well, I guess I'll let Ken do the announcement, since he'll be next, and he'll have a big thing that we're doing collaboratively that he'd like to announce. And I'd like to thank Ken for taking the time to join us today. He's a very prominent person in the aquaponics field. He's been teaching commercial classes for quite a long time. He teaches the largest, the largest aquaponics commercial class in the United States, aquaponic farm course that he teaches, I think, 4 times a year, correct?
Yeah, we'll do it 5 times this year, but yep.
Okay, 5 times, yeah. So yeah, he's very, very experienced. He's one of the most knowledgeable people in the field, and I really appreciate him taking the time to join us today. Why don't you tell us about yourself and the big announcements?
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on with you and all your watchers. Yeah, my name's Ken Armstrong. I'm the owner and founder of Ouroboros Farms, along with Jessica Patton, who's my wife and business partner in the business. We've been growing aquaponically on a commercial level for almost 5 years now. We got started in April of 2012. We took the very first aquaponic farming course that was ever happened with Gina Cavallero and Sylvia Bernstein and Murray Hallam. And we were so inspired by that class that we came and built a commercial. My very first aquaponic system was a 20,000 gallon system in a 6,000 square foot greenhouse. I would not recommend starting that big. Provides lots of learning opportunities with that. But we're actually in our second location. We started in Pescadero, and now we're in Half Moon Bay, California, right on Highway 92. We had the opportunity to move our facility to a new location that had better light, better temperature, and better water quality. Also a nice large retail space, about 1,000 square feet worth of retail. Nice 200 square foot walk-in cooler. Actually have a real office rather than just a table set up in a greenhouse. We also have a 1,000 square foot education and event center, where we teach classes and also hold farm to table dinners as well. So we've been in that new location for 2.5 years right now, and we're really excited about the opportunities that are presenting itself for us here going into the future. I've been teaching classes now for 4 years. First year taught, didn't really know what we were doing. We were sort of newbies in the whole industry, and got hooked up with Murray Hallam, and now we are one of the training locations for the aquaponic farming course. We are the most successful so far of the farms that have gone through that course, and so now we are one of their West Coast training locations. And we'll be holding 3-day commercial level classes to teach anybody who wants to get into the aquaponics business everything you need to know on the commercial level. It's not the basics, but really gets into the commercial production, production planning, integrated pest management, and all the things that you need to do to run a successful farm. And along with that, super excited as well for the educational opportunities with Steve as well. Coming up here, the first one in January, the 20th and 21st and 22nd of January, we'll be doing our first aquaponic cannabis class, or as we call it, the aquachronic class. It's not the chronic, it's the aquachronic. Right. And super happy to have Steve coming to our farm and teaching that class with his experience in growing cannabis in aquaponically. We are experts in growing produce, and arguably we probably have one of the nicest farms that's in existence right now. So we're super excited to be partnering with Steve as well, to be expanding our educational opportunities and having a spectacular commercial production farm as the backdrop for this very, very interesting, very exciting class that we're going to be teaching.
Which I think is really important if you're going to have a class, to be able to have a facility that is going to be able to accommodate for that. I mean, it's really, you know, sort of a necessity. If you just sort of show up in a room and try to explain aquaponics without any sort of reference around it, you might as well just watch people's eyes glaze over.
Yeah. I totally agree. I know there are some other courses out there where they teach commercial aquaponics class, and it's either somebody's backyard system or it's a hydroponic system, not using aquaponics at all. So yeah, that's something we had very unique here at our farm. And not only do we teach our own classes, but we've really focused our attention on being a collaborative educational space. So we've opened it up to other commercial trainers out there, because we honestly believe there's so much to learn in this industry, and everybody's experiences are different. Everywhere you grow is going to be a little bit different climate-wise as well. And so the broader breadth you have of different experiences and places where people are growing and their experiences they can share, I think is valuable for the industry as a whole. So we're really excited about that collaborative effort, not only with cannabis, but other commercial producers, to really sort of help spread the word. And because we do have a facility whereby you can go out and touch the plants and see the piping and really get into the nitty-gritty of how everything's put together and how it all operates to create the spectacular produce that these type of systems can create.
Right, and I think that you know, I don't have any issue with small backyard people doing training, as long as they're advertising that they're small backyard people. I feel like that, and they're advertising that as the class. If you're a small backyard person and you advertise a commercial aquaponics class, then that's, you know, that's sort of where I draw the line. And again, different challenges, big and small, you know, are going to create different, you know, different solutions. So I definitely think that. But if you're going to teach and advertise that you're going to teach a commercial aquaponics class, then it really should be at a successful commercial aquaponics place. I mean, it just makes sense. So I think that's a good solution you guys have there.
Yep, I certainly agree.
I've been having a hard time with the cannabis, aquaponic cannabis producers I'm working with have everything under such heavy NDA that I can't repost anything or show off anything unless they approve it first, and it makes it really hard and frustrating sometimes. I have one grower that let me show off pretty much anything from their grow, which is at the same time, you know, I'm still honored to work with them. You've been actually featured on PBS and a whole bunch of other cool things. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to have gotten a lot of television press. We were on the PBS NewsHour, their national primetime news broadcast. The team came out, a great team of people came out they were at our farm for about 8 hours. Spent the whole time filming and created a nice 8-minute piece that was really spectacular. They're, of course, one of those things with any of those type of productions, you have no creative control over it. So, of course, there are certain things that slip in there that might not necessarily want in there. We also had a Bloomberg TV came out and did a spot on us at our original farm over in Pescadero. Also had Al Jazeera USA came out and did a piece on us as well. We've been in the San Jose Mercury News, the front page of their local section one time as well. Been in the local papers a number of times. I was on KGO Radio, a talk show, one evening out here in the San Francisco area as well. So it's funny, we never sought out any of this promotion, and all these people sort of found us, and we've just been very fortunate to have been able to be available for that, and really feel honored and blessed to be able to spread the word about aquaponics in any way that we can.
Well, it sounds like you're doing that.
Work with,
Go ahead, Steve.
I think with younger people, reaching out to the local schools there or something like that.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we do both public and private tours. The first Saturday of every month we hold a public tour that anybody from the public can come. We also do private tours pretty much any day of the week if people can pre-arrange that to come. We charge $150. It's either $15 a person or $150 for a 2-hour tour led personally by myself, and I'll walk through. And this can be geared towards the individual practitioner. So if you want to come and say, okay, explain this part of your system, you want to spend 2 hours doing that, it's like 2 hours worth of consultation at a fraction of my normal rate. So, and aside from that, we've also conjuncted or worked with a lot of schools as well. We've had anywhere from elementary schools all the way up to university level classes that have come and done school tours of the facility as well. Because again, I think it's really important to teach that next generation of farmers. They are going to be the ones that are going to be growing the food in the future, and as technology progresses, they're the ones that are going to be really innovating. And the younger generations, they're really thinking about sustainability, and they're really thinking about how do we really manage the resources that are available to us on this finite planet. And so we're super excited those opportunities to teach kids of all ages about aquaponics and really reconnect them with where food comes from. So many kids nowadays say, where do carrots come from? They're like, oh, the grocery store. It's like, no, this is a carrot. And you pull a carrot out of the system, like, you know, their eyes get wide, and just really the amazement. So that opportunity to really connect with younger people and show them that there's a different way of doing things, that our corporatized food production system is not the only way that it can be done, and that aquaponics is one of those things that really empowers individuals and puts the power back in the hands of communities.
That's wonderful. I know that's definitely one of my favorite things. I love growing stevia in my front display beds for that reason. The little kids are like, oh, it's just a bunch of green, that, and you pull a leaf off and you give it to them and they eat it and it tastes like candy. And suddenly you have their full attention. You know, it's so fun. Or you let them feed the fish, or, you know, and not only that, with education, you know, they can teach so many different topics, you know, math, physics, biology, botany, you know, it works out so well. It's engineering, fluid dynamics, physics, like you name it.
Yep. All subjects taught in schools nowadays can be incorporated into an aquaponics system. Yeah, without a doubt. It's everything right there, and it's a living, breathing system that they can really sort of work with and connect with. It's really, it's fantastic. Yeah, like you said, the stevia, we had a stevia plant. We always give that to the kids. That's a fantastic little thing. And you know, it's funny, the younger the kids are, the more the word poo comes into the conversation. So you know, the elementary school kids, like every other word is poo, and they just love it. So
So you've had a chance to have a bunch of experience with a wide range of customers and a lot of people with a lot of problems, and even, you know, doing some larger consulting. What are some of the more common issues you run into? And then I guess as a second question, what are some of the funnier things that you run into? Like, I've had customers call me and tell me they put OxyClean in their system to clean out the dirt. I've had people use window cleaner to try and kill aphids. I've had people their pH by about 8 times. I've had this honest question 4 or 5 times where people ask me what the acceptable level of uranium or radon was in the water that they could use.
Wow.
And a whole bunch of just really strange, entertaining questions that I could almost write a small book on. What are some of the stuff that you run into, and then common problems, or, you know, common issues or points that you'd like to bring up that are, I guess, less addressed in aquaponics?
Let me take that second one first. I think the most common mistake that happens in aquaponics is the improper management of pH. I can't tell you how many times, you know, on the boards or somebody calls up, I'm having an issue, and of course the first question is you ask what their pH is. Oh, my pH is 8.5. It's like, well, okay, that's what your problem is. And that's the most common thing. I think the improper management of pH and the understanding of how essential it is to your system, is probably the most common mistake that we find that people get, and the most common question that we get from people. Geez, I've had, I'm getting a lot of people asking about shrimp or different types of things that you can grow in your system. Interesting, funny. It's sort of a question now that I think of it. Of course, tons of things that come up.
I was sort of alarmed by the number of people that asked me if they could use their saltwater fish tank.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I guess I just sort of figured that was maybe more along the lines of common sense. But,
yeah.
You know, maybe some kelp. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, we had at least the total noobs is like, do I have to feed the fish? Like that's always a question. Like, do I have to feed? Is this a totally self-sufficient system? It's like, no, you actually have to feed the fish. That's how the fish are actually just a means of getting the fish food to the plants.
I've gotten that one too.
They get that quite often.
There were a couple of questions here in chat also. Let's see. Let me scroll up to the top here. Really interested in dual root zone, raising non-indigenous fish. Right, so non-indigenous fish is definitely, you know, every state's going to be different in terms of that. You know, like Oregon, you have to get a permit for pretty much everything except catfish. And that's always a good general one to check into because catfish are pretty much, you know, they have a wide indigenous area. You know, they're indigenous to most areas, so that's usually a relatively safe bet. And then, like Fish Ganja guy said, you can always go with koi or goldfish you can just get from the pet store, and then you don't have to worry about a permit, especially in a, you know, just a small home system. And obviously, if you're not looking to eat them, but catfish is definitely an option that you can check out. And then there are other ones. I know Ken, you were talking about looking into trout because you had a, you know, sort of a specific little market there. And they come with their difficulties. They need cooler water and a little more movement and different things like that. And Steve, I think you recommended another kind that I hadn't heard of before. I can't remember now. You were talking about that's relatively easy to get a permit for.
For cold water?
Was it
talking about
perch or bluegill or something like that?
Perch? Yeah, perch or another one. Yellow perch are really common in Colorado because they're cold tolerant. You can put them with catfish. Right. And as long as if you're doing it, even in a greenhouse, you can bring your temperature up and down over the course of, you know, in the fall and in the spring gradually, and they'll adjust just fine without too much of an issue. When I used to run the R&D greenhouse back at the aquaponic source, we used to run it about a 10-degree temperature difference between summer and winter, and it still kept everything nutrient available, but it definitely allowed us to cut back on the heating that we required and using, you know, relying much heavier on solar heaters rather than having to deal with, you know, spending fuel or electricity. If you're looking for a good registered list on how to go about which fish you can use, your best bet, and you can go to almost any state in the union and go online, your local DNR will have a list of registered resellers for game fish, and they will always be able to give you legal, locally sourced, you know, fish, and you can find a local farm that's near you. Pretty much every DNR that I've ever looked up for a customer, but I can't recall any state that didn't have that publicly listed.
Right, and they will also have the information for permits. So if you do need one for catfish or you need one for tilapia or whatever, they'll have the information on to where to get them. And they're usually not expensive, but it's, you know, kind of a pain in the butt. You fill out an application, and it's like, I think here it's like $12 for a fish handler's license in Oregon.
Yeah,
and this is all this is going to change state by state, county by county. I know California, at least when we got started, I mean, we run koi, hybrid carp, and catfish, and we didn't even have any sort of license the first 2 years we were in business because we didn't have any intention of selling. At least in California, commercially, you don't need a aquaculture license unless you intend on either live hauling your fish or selling them. But if you just have them in tanks, I mean, the first couple of years we didn't have. I had the head of the department come out and check out my facility, and we didn't need any sort of permitting at all until we started selling them.
Yeah. So on that note, what I pretty much recommend to every single commercial cannabis customer that I work with right now, I tell all of them to go with koi for a couple of reasons. One, They're much more forgiving and tolerant if you really screw up. They're very nitrogen tolerant compared to other fish. If your nitrogen spikes, your nitrate spike, your nitrite spikes, if anything gets high, you're not going to, you might lose one or two, but it's not, you're much less likely to get a full crash. They're much more tolerant, at least temporarily, than many other fish species. They're cold tolerant. So if your heater breaks, they're not going to immediately die. They might get ick, but they're not going to die off the bat. The reason is, like just what you were saying with licensing, is in most states it's $150 or less for a pet trade license or an aquaculture license in most states, which is infinitely cheaper than a meat processing license if you plan on cutting them up or doing anything like that, which is a whole separate set of licensing, because then you're talking food processing. Once a knife gets involved, everything changes. So if you are going to do tilapia, you want to have fresh, whole, frozen or live fish, and anything outside of that requires a whole separate set of headache. Well, depending on the scale that you're doing, headache licensing.
Right.
But it's very, it gets annoying to have like a meat processing license and a cannabis license. It's weird. And it's a lot of licensing and paperwork and fees, and especially when you're trying to get launched as a business, it's much simpler just to get a simple pet trade license.
Plus, the market for ornamental fish is relatively decent. I really had no idea that like ornamental koi, if you get some unique colored ones and you get them to a decent size, you get more money than you could sell a big catfish for. That's for damn sure.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
You can grow a wide variety of tropical fish that will all have a much higher increase in value for every inch that you put on the fish. A tilapia, Ken, you could tell me what a tilapia market's for right now, probably, right?
Actually, tilapia are illegal this part of the state, so we can't use tilapia up here.
Okay. Well, tilapia, I know most of the time you're looking at I know in Jamaica they're like $3 to $4 a pound.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty standard.
It can't be a whole lot different than that. So that's just the last big market I tried to sell tilapia in. A koi, I could do butterfly koi, and for every inch I put on that fish, it's going to increase at least $10 per inch on that fish. Whereas a tilapia, I'm still, a 1 pound fish takes 8 to 10 months, for 1 pound of fillets, if that, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
when it comes to market value versus input, a lot of these tropical arowanas, pacu, arapaima, at some point I'm going to get around to doing a full freshwater stingray tank, because they put out raw urea, which works better as plant food, but that's a whole other discussion we can get into at a different time. But there's plenty of different tropical fish that have a very high value, that as long as you're not running your nitrates too high, you can grow out just fine and get a much bigger increase in value per inch that you put on that fish with the same amount of input.
Yeah, there's some great koi farms where you can get small koi for maybe about $1 each, and just grow them out for a year or two, and that $1 fish is now worth. And if you get the right coloring, that fish can be worth a couple $100. So.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Before I did aquaponics, I had no idea about pet fish, or really, other than my kids had a goldfish that we had for years before it finally died. But other than that, I had no idea. But obviously, once I think I've had systems for I think going on 5 years now. So a lot of those original ones I bought are getting to be pretty good size now, and so I started checking into it, and I was really surprised. So that's definitely, if you're checking out fish and you're not overly concerned about eating the fish, obviously, then ornamentals is a great way to go. And like Steve was saying, for commercial applications, it's it's a lot simpler if you're looking to grow cannabis, to be able to have just a handler's license, which basically just means the fish has to stay alive. You can sell it, but you have to sell it alive. So that's essentially the difference. Like Steve said, as soon as the knife comes out and anything dies, that's when everything changes. So I think that pretty well covers fish, unless anybody else has any other suggestions.
What fish species are you growing there, or do you recommend, Ken, or what fish species do you have experience with? I believe you did a thing with white sturgeon at one point, didn't you?
John Parr of School Grown was with us, and he was actually doing sturgeon there for a little while. I'd like to get into sturgeon, or we do channel catfish and koi right now, but we're actually looking to maybe do a little bit of trout because our systems, we have 2 systems that are 30,000 gallons of total water volume. And we don't have a heating element right now, so there's no global warming in San Francisco this year. Our temperatures are about 8 degrees cooler on average than they were last year, so our water temperatures are running about the high 50s right now, which is way too cold for the catfish. They're not eating at all. The koi are still doing fine, but we're looking actually to pick up some trout. Crazy cat. We're looking to pick up some trout. Because there's some smoking areas, there's some smokers kind of where we are. So again, that value-added product where we actually don't have to process them, we can just live haul them to our to one of these smokers, and now that fish that we bring in probably costs us $5 or $6 a fish to have that smoked, and now it's a $30 value-added item, smoked, filleted, processed, vacuum sealed. Now we can sell it directly out of our retail space, or we can sell it to grocery stores or anything like that without having to actually get that processing license. But I would recommend koi if you're, so much about where your climate is. If you're not looking for a food fish, koi are probably the best fish you can get. As Steve said, they're very tolerant of a wide variety of environmental conditions. They're a forgiving fish if you do have some issues or have some problems in your system. And if you can find the diamond in the rough, and they are a fish that actually does have some value. You can get a lot more for a single koi than you could ever get for a catfish. But sturgeon is one of those fish also that's very interesting. I mean, they're super cool looking fish, great feed to conversion ratio. They grow really fast, really quickly. Though they're a longer term crop. I believe it's about 4 years for steaks and about 7 years for caviar if you want to go that route.
Right.
But again, wide range of conditions. They live in the San Francisco Bay. There's some sturgeon in the bay that are probably 200 years old, so they'll live forever.
Right. Really similar to the
sturgeon in a fish tank, but
yeah, actually, I didn't know koi could live that long either. I looked that up the other day. My son asked me how old can koi get, and so we looked it up, and there's some on record that are like 220 years old.
Yeah.
And they think they might even be older than that. That's like just when they started keeping track of how old they were. So
yeah, the Japanese Royal Botanical Gardens in Japan, the Royal Gardens has been keeping koi records for like 800 or 900 years, I think, and they have like full lineages on all the royal strains, or not strains. I call it strains because it's different strains of fish.
Hit the pipe again, Steve. Hit the pipe again.
The different lineages of koi there, and they have there was one fish that lived to be 229 years old that lived in the Royal Japanese Imperial Gardens.
Wow.
Yeah, cool stuff.
So I have a question for you, Ken. Is on the trout systems, are you running them disconnected or decoupled, I guess is the word?
No, I mean our systems are completely integrated. So it wouldn't be a decoupled system. Some of the projects that I'm consulting on, some other facilities, those are going to be decoupled systems, and which would make it a lot easier to run those type of fish. So it could be challenging because our water quality isn't absolutely pristine, just because with catfish and koi you don't need it to be absolutely pristine. With trout, we're gonna have to really work on, probably add a little bit of additional solids filtration onto our system to make sure that we can clean up that water a little bit better for those fish.
They have a little bit higher dissolved oxygen content than catfish, especially.
Yep.
That's one other thing. Since we were on the fish topic, that's one other thing to consider is if you do consider doing trout or any river species, even if it's not trout, like regardless of where you are on the planet, river species tend to almost always require a higher pH than lake or pond species of fish, or even if you're going for native varieties, and it's something to always keep in mind. The other thing I'd like to at least touch on, since we're on the fish topic, is I try to always, even when doing tilapia systems or perch systems or bluegill systems or whatever, try to always have at least a handful of catfish, 2 catfish or 4 catfish or 5 catfish, because they cruise around the bottom and they kick up that fish waste from the other fish, and they keep the bottom clean. If something gets sick, something dies, they'll eat it. Just like in some systems you can keep crayfish, but catfish work much better. That and keeping a few algae eaters in there also helps keep the system clean. What have you found you used for algae cleaners if you do use them?
We haven't used anything for algae cleaners.
I've had good success with plecos, plecostomus. So if you're looking for a little bit, I mean, it's still basically a catfish, I guess. I mean, it's a little sucker fish that cruises around, but they're kind of cool looking. They have, they have some decoration to them. So if you're doing just ornamentals, then plecostomus is a pretty good option.
That's another great value-added item. Plecostomus, a lot of the more exotic plecos run between $20 and $60 a piece. But if you grow that sucker out to a foot or two, you're going to command $200 to $500 depending on the variety that it is for a large adult.
And they will get
big. Breed them very easily in an aquaponic system. And for something that's also cleaning algae for you, if you replace it every 2 to 3 years and you're making a couple $100 profit on it, royal plecos, sailfin plecos, gibiceps, flamefin plecos, zebra plecos are all great options for very high return. That's another fish that you're putting $20 or $30 per inch on that sucker. And again, you don't even have to feed the suckers. You can the ones that I have, I throw a couple of extra pot leaves in there every week, and that's all they eat aside from the algae. And it's more than enough for them.
They're a lot less temperature tolerant than koi, though. They don't have
they won't take much below about 65, and then you'll kill them off 60. But
there's a funny story about a koi though. If you want to talk about
water, go ahead.
I had a koi that I didn't realize I left in a tank outside, and I went out probably a month later. There was still some water just sitting in the tank. And I noticed it swimming around in there. Still, the water over the top was completely frozen. I had to break the ice off the top, and obviously it wasn't getting fed or anything. But it's fine. Just swimming around all slow. I pulled it out, kind of slowly warmed it up, and it's still in the tank now.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was more than surprised.
Yeah, I've never had them survive much below about 52. We had a heater failure where I was at doing in the R&D greenhouse for the aquaponic source one time. The heater failed and one of the walls blew off the greenhouse, and it got down to about 52 water degrees, and they survived. But that's the lowest temperature I've ever seen them live through. If you're going to do colder water, the two species I would recommend to you are either panda garas or gara rufas, which are both in the same family. Gara rufas are also known as doctor fish. They're very cold water tolerant. They come from streams in Mongolia and China. And panda garas are also another one of those. They're smaller, but they'll readily breed in your system. You can sell them for a decent profit, and they'll happily climb through your plumbing and clean the scum and the algae out of any plumbing that you have. Just be mindful that they might occasionally get shredded in your filter. But they're pretty small. But they're very cool. And then if you're looking for something larger, to basically be like a pleco replacement, similar-ish, is a Chinese high-fin algae eater, also sometimes called a pond shark. And they're also they're cold tolerant, the exact same temperature range as koi are, which makes them great koi companions, because if you want to bring the temperature down or whatever, if something happens, an emergency or whatever, nothing dies, even though they're an algae eater. So those would be my two cold tolerant recommendations. And then for raft beds, one of the ones, especially for commercial producers that we've tested in lab back at my old job, and then to a lesser extent since then, is the red cherry shrimp and crystal shrimp. Both of those guys are amazing for keeping your roots clean, keeping them not pruned, but keeping something walking on them to keep them, nice and clean and dusted off and stimulated. Them and vampire crabs have been very useful in keeping the raft beds, pretty much low maintenance, so that you have something in there that's eating the dead stuff or the old stuff on the bottom where it gets kind of pinned against the styrofoam. So, what
also talked about something else, Steve. Vampire crabs, was that it? Vampire
crabs are they've only been like officially scientifically documented since 2012. but they hit the pet trade pretty hardcore, and they come in a large color variety. But you can put them in your raft bed system, and they'll regularly, they're detrivores. They won't touch anything that's living unless they're starving to death. But you'll always have some insects or some dead leaves or some decaying leaves, or, you know, the bottom of your lettuce, even if you're doing raft beds, the outer leaf or two, you always end up pulling off before you bring to sale, you know, for commercial sale. And it helps basically get rid of menial everyday maintenance by just having something come pop back and put any kind of waste out that's going to be an issue as pathogen. Really well in raft systems.
I don't know if you're lagging out or I'm lagging out.
I think you're lagging out. Are you there, Ken?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, you were cutting out on me too, Steve.
Oh, okay. Sorry. My internet connection here isn't the world's greatest. I'm actually using my cell phone right now, so I do apologize if I cut out a little bit. But the stream is
You seem fine now.
The stream is hosted separately from me, so if there is a hiccup, it won't happen to anyone that's listening. It'll just happen on me talking to you guys.
Okay.
So, what plant species do you grow the most, or what plant species? Is there anything you recommend or definitely do not recommend for aquaponics that you run into with at Ouroboros?
Oh yeah. Oh geez, we've tried so many different. I think we've gone through about 150 different varieties of lettuce. We've narrowed it down to 10 currently. We do the full spectrum of the Salanova lettuces available through Johnny's. We do all different 8 of those varieties. Then we do a Merlot lettuce, a red large leaf lettuce, and Breen, which is a small red romaine. Aside from that, we also do collard greens, chard, mustard greens, Mizuna, pak choi tatsoi, lemongrass, cherry tomatoes. We're experimenting with some loofah this year, which we're having really good success with. Just planted some garlic in some of our media beds, which is doing really well so far. We've done hops in the past, which did absolutely spectacularly. Our first year rhizomes outperformed the third year rhizomes that we had. Peppers. There's, I mean, so many different things. The two things that we've had difficulty growing in our system are arugula and spinach. I'm not exactly sure why. We've tried them a couple different times in different seasons in both of our different farms and never been able to get either of those two products to grow very well. So that's ones that we've had challenges with. Tomatoes, you know, tomatoes can be challenging, especially with a fully integrated system where everything's being shared. Obviously with the dual root zoning and some of those other methodologies that we'll be covering in the cannabis classes that we'll be teaching as well. Methodologies would definitely be helpful, and next year we'll probably look to doing that. We didn't do that this year, and it did provide some challenges to keep that production of those tomatoes up without compromising or providing way too much potassium for the rest of our system. We did notice that a lot of our Chinese herbs, when we were supplementing with a lot of potassium, they would bolt almost immediately as soon as they came up. So it compromised the production in some of our leafy greens with that. But we've tried just about everything. You know, growing commercially, it's a totally different consideration. You've got to grow what can make money. So lettuce is going to be the powerhouse of a commercial aquaponics facility. Basil does really well also, but lettuce, it's super easy to grow. It's a quick turn crop in a greenhouse, and with the temperate water, it really provides both frost and bolt protection for the system. And all the restaurants want it. They can't get better quality produce anywhere. We're really focusing on the local market. Up here in the San Francisco Bay Area has been a very foodie area, really a lot of the trends that happen in the food industry. And the newest trend right now is local. So if you're interested in getting into the produce production, I had the head buyer for LA San Francisco Specialty Produce come out to my farm a couple months ago. And they're the largest produce buyer in San Francisco, or actually in California. They supply Facebook, Google, NetApp, Cisco, all the big Silicon Valley companies. All the Silicon Valley companies are demanding local. They don't care about organic. Doesn't make any difference to them. They want local product because they're getting organic stuff from Chile, which is of questionable quality. A lot of the organic stuff is coming out of China. I don't believe anything coming out of China that's organic. So a lot of the corporations and their employees, that's what they're demanding. They want to know what's in their food chain. They want to know where their food's coming from. So the big corporate move right now is to local. So if you have local stuff, that is the pinnacle of the food chain right now. And you add with aquaponics, we harvest to order, so we don't harvest anything out of our system until somebody actually orders it. So at the most, our customers are getting product that's a couple hours out of our system, so they cannot get better looking, better tasting, higher quality, longer lasting, fresher produce anywhere. And so you've got to, then you add all the environmental benefits on top of that, and you've got a premium product that commands a premium price. I mean, we have no problem selling our products at all.
Are you a certified organic or certified naturally grown facility, or?
No, we're not. I may look into getting the certified naturally grown. We've purposely chosen not to get organic certification. We use organic fish feed as the basis. We use organically approved integrated pest management procedures. We use organic supplements into our system. But honestly, we already sell our products at higher than organic prices. So there's no point in getting the organic certification. It would just be an additional cost. Obviously, the organics, there's a marketing value with that term, and by having that would broaden our appeal to a bunch of other markets. But we're selling everything we're growing right now at higher than organic prices, so we don't need it. Certified naturally grown. I mean, there's some challenges with organics as well. We use iHort plugs as our grow media, and the polymer in them is not organically certifiable currently. One thing we found with a larger system too, I've never had to buffer my systems. My commercial systems, I've always had to acidify. I've never had to buffer. And so there aren't any organically approved acidifying agents as well, which can provide a challenge.
Could you use like OMRI, like citric acid, for instance?
Yep. You can use that, but I believe citric acid, one, it's a very weak acid, so you'd have to use a very large quantity of it. And I believe citric acid is also antibacterial, so might actually compromise the ability of your system to function properly.
Well, yeah, and I think, if you're having to bring your pH down, you're having to acidify it with some sort of acid anyway. I mean, that's, so it's obviously a compromise in which one you use. And we've talked about on the show before, like phosphoric acid, and different things. But you obviously just said a lot of those things are difficult to acquire in a OMRI approved situation. So I think citric acid is probably one of the few that you could find a source of, but you would have to use a lot of it. And it is, obviously then antimicrobial. So the less using less is better generally, and that's why we generally recommend phosphoric acid. Or Steve has a great method of lowering your pH right away on a large scale system. Do you want to share that again, Steve? You're on mute, bud.
Ken, quick question for you. Just to get a little bit more clarification from you. I think you were saying earlier that the big push has been to go towards the local market, how the organic and some of the other certifications aren't as important, how the big trend is these local markets. Can you elaborate? Can you talk more in detail about some of the bigger corporate agribusinesses that you've worked with lately?
Well, we haven't worked with any corporate agribusiness, but I do have connections into. I've done talks at Google, been to NetApp, SanDisk, and given presentations at these various corporations to their usually in their lunchrooms. The produce buyers in San Francisco, that's what their customers are demanding. The large corporate businesses, they're demanding, they want local products. They want stuff that's grown locally. Their consumers, the people that eat there, are looking for we like the sort of the term "know your farm, know your farmer." They want transparency in our food system. The big push against labeling initiatives all across the country, obviously pushed by big agribusiness. To try to keep what's hidden in our food, or what's in our food, hidden. But there's a groundswell, or a sort of a movement, I think, among the populace that they want transparency in their food systems, and they want to know where their food's coming from. And even though the media is telling us that that's not what we want, consumers are demanding that. And so the ability to actually know where your food's coming from. I think aquaponics is perfectly situated. I often describe it very much as Airbnb or Uber is to their particular industries, as Airbnb is to the hotel industry and Uber is to the taxi industry. disruptive technologies to established institutions. And with the ability of aquaponics to grow an incredible amount of food on a very small point of land, and using fewer resources, it really empowers local food systems and local communities as well. So, one of those funny things about the future, I can see an aquaponics facility being the hub of a community, because food has always been that thing that's brought people together. We share a meal, we break bread together. The idea of sharing bread and salt. In olden days, if you came into somebody's house and you would have bread and salt, and now you've shared a meal or shared food in somebody's space, and now you have protection in that space. So food has always been something that's brought people together, and we've gotten so far away from that. And I see in our industry and our experiences that the trend is moving back towards that people, food is life, food is medicine. I've even seen studies that say about 90% of all health-related problems are all related to diet, and people are realizing this, and that the sort of the insanity to have given our food production system over to the world's largest poison manufacturer that's not interested in growing food, they're interested in selling poison, and people are realizing this. People are really waking up to this and are demanding to know what's in their food. And so when you have a facility that can grow in a local marketplace, because aquaponics can be done anywhere, in greenhouses, indoors, outdoors, rooftops, empty parking lots, basically all this underutilized space, and can be a fantastic way of bringing people together, and bringing communities together as well, where they can share that commonality of food and that which we really need to live.
Thank you, Ken. I had a quick question. I know that Micah wanted to ask. I'll hand him the mic now.
Hi, I'm Micah Winowski. I became acquainted with Steve at the last farm that I was fortunate enough to work at and work with him. And now we're working together here at Eden. I have been kind of enthralled with aquaponics since being introduced to it through Steve and learning about infinitely small microbes that do everything. But primarily before that, I was a soil farmer. I won and swept kind of all 8 categories at the county fair for homegrown produce with the smallest amount of space. But the big thing right now, I guess, is a hot topic is, if you could touch on, I guess, your opinions and feelings on it, is the difficulty in being deemed, I guess, organic with soilless mediums. It's very easy to be certified organic in soil, but not so much apparently with aquaponics. So I wanted, I guess, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's actually not that hard with aquaponics to get. Currently, if you because you don't have to have that soil remediation that happens for a number of years. So you can an aquaponics facility actually can be certified organic before they even start growing anything, or shortly thereafter. So almost immediately, because you don't have that soil-borne component. Yeah, there's that big talk. I know that the National Organic Board just met, I think, a week or 2 ago, and they had comments. There were a couple representatives from the Aquaponics Association that went there and actually presented information regarding this, and basically put it to the soil farmers, like, all right, here is all of our evidence. And they provided all this evidence of microbial activity around the root zones and all the microbiomes that are existing there. And they actually basically put it back to the soil farmers, like, all right, now prove your case. Prove that, instead of having us to prove a negative, now prove you're positive. So I believe they punted it at this point. So they've decided not to rule on it at this time. So both hydroponic and aquaponic gardening can still be certified as organic. My own personal opinion on that, there's nothing more natural than aquaponics. I mean, you're creating a living ecosystem. This is a river, lake, stream ecosystem that you're doing in a controlled environment. I mean, you can't get anything more pure unless you're walking down the riverside and you find something growing naturally on the side of the road. So for aquaponics now, hydroponics, obviously there's organic hydro, which I understand, but my own personal, if the rules are set out as they are and you are following the rules as they are set out, why should you be disavowed? I see it as soil farmers trying to carve out their own niche, which I understand. They're trying to protect their turf, because there is, particularly as far as hydroponics go, there are questionable there's a lot of hydroponic or organic hydroponic stuff that's coming out of Mexico or China, and so there are questions with where it's coming from. So I understand, but for me, aquaponics, I just don't see any sort of rationale how you could keep aquaponics out of an organic certification, because it's a completely natural process that's happening. So
Yeah, agreed. Yep.
So, what are your? I guess I have a question. Earlier you touched on pH being the biggest issue. What are your go-to pH adjusters? How about as far as that goes?
Either phosphoric or muriatic. Those two. I hate using muriatic, but when you have 30,000 gallons of water that you have to change the pH on, one of those things, sort of backup systems. Sort of a good anecdote type of thing that just happened recently when we were at the Aquaponics Association conference, where I was honored to be the keynote speaker this year. We left the farm to an associate of ours to take care of it. First time Jessica and I had been away from the farm for more than, I think, 3 days, and we were gone for 5 days. And he put some top-up water in on Friday and forgot that it was on, and basically did 100% water change in one of our systems over the weekend. And our pH went from about 6.9 up to about 8 in a very short period of time. And I've been spending the last 2 weeks trying to get it back down. I think I've gotten it back to, it's down to 7.6 now, but it's a very slow and laborious process. I think I put about 10 gallons of acid in so far and only been able to get it to drop about 0.3 of a point. And, when you're talking about that, I buy 55-gallon drums of phosphoric acid, and that's $8 a gallon when you're buying it at that quantity, in that format. Whereas muriatic acid, you're looking at $4 or $5 a gallon for that type of stuff. So I usually switch off back and forth. I prefer phosphoric just because it is providing some sort of nutrient base for the plants. But also you don't want to put too much phosphoric in there too, so you don't want to get a huge phosphorus spike as well. So those are the two that I use most commonly. I'd love to be able to use nitric acid, and I looked into that, but to deal with that stuff, you need a full chem suit, hazmat, spill station, all that kind of stuff, and that was just a level of danger that I was not comfortable dealing with.
Right, and we touched on this before. Another reason that you talked about for phosphoric being a good option to provide some level of nutrients. Also, specifically if you have hard water that is like calcium based, because then you're sort of balancing that out to where if, a lot of times there's not a lot of phosphorus content in like even my well water here, but I have a lot of calcium content, and so it definitely can help out. It's a way to add some level of phosphorus without also adding calcium, because most of the time when you try to dose something, even the stuff that we get and normally recommend for dosing phosphorus also has a level of calcium content. So I have to be particularly careful if I want to add any additional, that I'm not, I try to not add too much at a time, because then my calcium will increase even more than what I would like it to, because it's already high to start with. So it just becomes an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It also, using too much phosphoric acid can cause two things. One, it'll make your lettuce bolt, as you were referencing earlier,
Right.
Along with potassium. But the other thing it'll do is, if you have too much phosphorus and your phosphorus level gets high enough, that actually can act as like a buffer on its own, just the same way that carbonates would if you slam it real high. I've only done it, well, I haven't done it once, but I've only heard of someone doing it once, but it is chemically possible to achieve that in a way that wouldn't be fish lethal. One of my favorite go-tos, and one that I haven't heard a whole lot of other people mention, is if you have a fresh system with no fish in it and it's like still cycling in the beginning, you can use, or you just built, you're finished leak testing it and everything, water's running through the system, you can use dry ice in your fish tank. And the carbonic acid generated by the CO2 will not only burn off the carbonates and lower your pH, but it also dissolves out into the air and doesn't leave any residuals behind that cause any issue.
It's good to know.
And that also might be a relatively cheap option for you, Ken, if you have some way to be able to store the water separately, dry ice it, bring the pH down, and then essentially do the same thing that your employee did, which is pump out all the water that you wanted to keep and put in all the new water.
Yeah. So for
repeat
that
the
kind
same
of
process
application, what
forever.
you would do is you'd string up like 3 fish. We'll just use the sake of argument. I've actually done this on large freshwater aquariums, exactly what you just referenced. And what we did was we ran CO2 on a CO2 tank that I got from a beverage store. You can rent them for like, deposit plus not a whole lot of money. You get a big CO2 tank. And what I used to run when I used to run big freshwater systems, especially big planted aquariums, or big freshwater systems where I had a whole wall of fish, but needed to regularly do a big water change with a high pH water, we'd run the whole system water through it was automated, but it would turn the CO2 on in the first trash can that had air stones in it. And it was plastic trash can and a Rubbermaid, whatever, 55-gallon drum for sake of argument. Run CO2 through the first chamber, injected with air stones, and then flowed that into 2 more trash cans that just had regular air stones that reoxygenated and degassed that CO2, and then put it back into the system so that the CO2 is never, ever high enough to ever be a fish issue. And those of you that run planted aquariums that run tank CO2 on that know that if you get it past 27 to 30%, you'll kill your fish. By taking it, going from one tank to 2 others that have an off gas, one, it's super low energy. Solenoid with a CO2 tank is very, very low power. And then the follow-up tanks with an air stone, again, very low power. You can run both those off of DC power for nothing. And then just have it as a flow through, and it works extremely well. I've used it on mostly fish tanks over 300 gallons. We're doing freshwater tanks as a backup CO2 system, but it works very well, that you can use in that scenario. But again, it's something you kind of have to, you'd only set that up if you constantly had a high pH input water source, or actually be a great thing for Ken, who's mostly having to focus on lowering pH without having to really, you don't want to be putting in a nutrient unless it's something like phosphoric acid that has a residual of phosphorus, that's plant beneficial. Trying to nail that down to stuff that's fish lethal can be kind of tricky.
So that's really good advice. Thank you for that. We're definitely going to look into that. Yeah, I mean, we have a couple of 1,300-gallon fish tanks that we could incorporate in that. So that'd be interesting to have water come from the system, go through one of the 13, put some dry ice in there, then have it filter into the other tank, put a bunch of air stones in there to off gas, and then have that recycle back into the system.
I wouldn't recommend doing the dry ice method that way. I would do tank CO2 so that you can control the exact one, so that your dissolve rate is constant.
Okay.
So it's not bouncing around. And 2, you're dumping a lot of CO2 in with this. Like, dry ice is only for nothing living in the system right now, because it just dumps too much too quickly, and you have no way to regulate it. And not only that, as it dissolves, it has less surface area. So in the beginning, it's putting out more than it is when it's halfway burned down. So that's why tank CO2 is better. Not to mention, you can put it on a bubble counter and know exactly how much CO2, and I can do the math based on the bubble count of the input on the CO2 level without even using a CO2 tester.
Okay.
It's more exact, which is when you're doing commercial, everything has to be predictable and exact. You can't have variables you want to eliminate as many unpredictable variables as you know.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely.
I was saying before that if you had a complete separate tank of water to be able to treat separately with the dry ice, but when you have huge systems, obviously you may not have 20,000 gallon tanks laying around that you can just treat water in. So that may not be an option, but you could treat the water separately if you had a big enough tank to store it in, treat it separately with the dry ice, and then do your water changes out of that water source.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could totally pre-treat a tank that was your fill tank or something like that before it went into the system. Give it a day or so to off gas the CO2 and then pump it in. That would not at all be an issue. You just don't want to do it in line with live fish in the system unless you're using tanked CO2 that you can regulate.
Right. Got it. Cool. Thank you for that.
Also,
that's some good.
Little disclaimer: I'm not responsible if anyone does that and overdoses and kills your fish. Don't hold me legally liable. That works when it's regulated on a bubble counter and properly set up.
Yeah.
If you have a problem, please send your email to Ponics.
Yeah. Ponics at Gmail for every dead fish. So, do you have any tips, tricks, or advice for people getting into new to aquaponics?
Oh, God, there's so many. The advice that I always give people is start small. If you're getting into this, start with a small system and get used to it and learn how the systems operate. Get used to handling the fish, all the various parameters that you have to be aware of, and the different types of testing and stuff to make sure that everything's running properly. And then it's really easy to expand. Most of these systems, there are a few wrong ways of doing it, but there's no one absolute right way of doing it. So it really does provide itself a lot to the creativity of the individual. A warning for any engineers out there: if you get into these systems, you're all done. You're over. You're never going to get away from them, because every engineer that I've ever met that's been introduced to aquaponic is just hopelessly addicted to it, because there are just all sorts of different ways you can tweak with different types of things and efficiencies and flow rates and all different types of stuff. But yeah, I mean, my main advice would be to start small and get used to it, and then expand from there. And get into it. It's so much fun. I'd never grown anything before. People ask, what did I do before this? Actually, right before this, I did past life regression hypnosis. And then prior to that, I worked for an environmentally friendly pet shampoo company that did biodegradable pet shampoos, my brother's company. And so I had no experience growing anything. I had no experience managing people or running a business. And so there was a lot of learning opportunities that went into this. And the main thing, I didn't grow anything because I always forgot to water it, so it died. So at least I'm one step ahead with that case. With aquaponics,
Exactly,
you don't have to worry about watering things. So, but
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just dive in, get a small system, and be creative. I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of money. Go to Free Cycle or Craigslist. You can find stuff. Obviously, you want to make sure it's food grade if it held any sort of containers. But there are lots of ways you can get into this without much and just get your hands wet, so to speak. And there's nothing better than eating the fruits of your own labor or hanging out with your own fishes and communicating with them, because this. And a bit of advice too: realize these are living ecosystems. This is a living, breathing thing, and you'll become attuned to it. It's really amazing when Jessica and I go into the farm. As soon as I walk in the door, we know immediately if something's not right. There are certain sounds, smells, sights that you'll become intimately attuned with it, and if something's not right, you'll know immediately. And it's really an interesting experience, sort of being interconnected with these systems, and it's almost like a living, breathing extension of yourself, and it's super rewarding. And when we take breaks, I don't go outside. I just pull up a chair and I just sit there and meditate with the plants. I personally have never grown cannabis this way, but I think how fantastic that would be as well, just to be able to spend time with that plant that you've given all this love and attention to, and in these integrated systems. These integrated systems that really, it's super rewarding, and it's the best thing I've ever done. I made this move about 5 years ago, and I have no regrets whatsoever.
Well, first of all, you definitely should grow cannabis in a system, and just to try it. And obviously,
for research purposes,
legalization changing. With legalization changing, I would encourage you to look at it as as you would look at any other profit margin.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And that there's very few plants that you can charge per pound what you can get for it, and it really has that value. Not just that you can charge it, but it has the value to the person that it's going to.
Yep.
On that note, do you want to touch on the clusterfuck going on in Oregon right now? Please.
Okay.
Because you know more about it than anyone
else. He
loves
to derail us into legal conversations because he knows you're LL.
Because they're relevant. They're super relevant.
I know.
This. Okay. I just want to quickly rant for 2 seconds. Talk about is exactly why you do not blindly vote for any legalization bill. Okay, go.
All right. So basically, here's what happened. For those of you that don't know, in Oregon right now is dealing with a serious bottleneck in production. And so, in maybe as a commercial grower, Ken, you can sort of try to understand some of what these people are going through in terms of getting their product held up and not be able to have it actually hit the market, and what that would do to you as a farmer just with your lettuce, for instance. And so what happened is that Oregon decided that you needed to have all of your product tested at a certified testing facility. So previously to this, you had to have tests done at a lab and provide those to a dispensary. And even patients could request it from their registered growers. If you just had somebody that was registered to grow for you, then you could request the test and be able to look at it. So, but you could get it from any lab that could provide the testing for you. And we're talking about pesticide testing, mold and mildew testing, those types of things, which definitely are important. And everybody agreed they needed to be done. And the market worked fine for years that way. I believe it was about 2.5 years that we had required testing. I have to look that up to be sure, but for quite a while we had required testing on cannabis that hit the dispensary. But recently now they had to certify any lab that it would go through. And so now you took the number of testing facilities that are available to send your product to, and you took it down to 0. Oh. And so then it was 1, and then it was 3, and then like now there's a handful of them essentially. And so what happened is not only were there a limited number of labs, but each one of those labs had limited number of resources. So those few labs got completely overran with products. And we're talking about products. Some of these products have a shelf life. Dried flour, obviously, has got a fairly long shelf life. Obviously, we want to get it on the market and when it's in its best condition. That's a pretty wide window for flour. But for things like edibles, certain types of edibles, or certain types of medications like RSO, or whatever you want, Rick Simpson oil essentially is, or full plant extract, essentially cannabis medication. So all of those things require different things to be able to test them, and some of them are difficult to get in large quantities, and nobody had them in large quantities because everything was distributed out wide. So what used to go to a lot of different places, now everybody had to go to a very small number of places to get it, and those places didn't even have the resources that you need to run the tests. So for those things like concentrates and edibles and medications and things like that, you had them essentially sitting at the labs waiting for the stuff to get in to be able to test them. And in some cases, those few labs didn't have enough resources available to store everything that needed to wait properly. So if it needed to be refrigerated at different temperatures, or it needed to be frozen, or whatever the requirements were, they didn't have enough resources available because they weren't used to dealing with the volume. So you have problems now with product being held up. You have product not being able to get to shelves. You have a large amount of products that are failing tests because they really increased the requirements for it. So they have a larger number of things that they're testing for. I think the list of things of the ban list is up to like 400 different things now that are essentially that have to be.
Are they doing total CFUs for microbes?
They are doing total CFUs for microbes, which is totally other.
Total CFUs is so fucked because total CFUs means absolutely nothing in terms of what is potentially dangerous on the product, because it has nothing to do with what is a pathogen that'll hurt you versus what is a beneficial bacteria. Like, say for example, you can actually you can spike high on that for using a product like Serenade, which is using Bacillus subtilis, which is literally a soil microbe that is also found in yogurt, by the way.
Any microbial
perfectly
farmer,
safe to both smoke
yeah.
or eat. To any, like, you could eat spoonfuls of it and be perfectly safe. It naturally lives
You'd
in your
probably be
intestines.
better off, honestly, if you did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it's beneficial. And there's no distinction between what is beneficial bacteria and, say, powdery mildew. And
Yep.
and a large number of organic farmers essentially failed for that. And that's actually been going on for quite a while, which is
Yep.
sort of another little finger of this whole thing.
That
But
happens
on
in
top of
California as well.
on top of being able to fail for all of the pesticides and all of that, with the recent changes to edibles and the recent changes to medications, you can only have a certain dose of that. You're limited to 10 milligrams of active content per dosage, like per individual wrapper content. So because of that, now not only can you fail for any pesticides, mold, mildew, beneficial bacteria, but you can also fail for just having too much medicine in your medicine. So I'm going to say that again.
California, by the way. California has the exact same regulations. For those of you that
get ready for this shitstorm, guys. That's basically what we're talking about. So, and now, in addition to that, okay, so now let's just go back to the volume thing, okay? You're limited in concentrates, you're limited in all these things, so which you can fail for all of those, and you have to get tested for all of them, but they up the amount you have to get tested. So let's say I grow 100 pounds of dried flower. I have to now get every 10 pounds tested. So it does scale a little bit. So once you get above about the 100-pound mark, you don't have to get it tested quite as often. So that's there is sort of a sliding scale there for people that produce a lot. But because they are requiring more testing than they did before, it increases the volume. So you also have now, we've already talked about how they've doubled it and sent it all to one place. So now you're also increasing literally just the number of volumes volume of tests that every grower needs to run. So not only are we all going to the same place, but now we're also all running more tests.
And what's the volume they need per test? Isn't it like 10 grams or something like that? Like, it's not a little amount.
It's not a large amount either, especially if you're...
No, but 10 grams at 12, like Colorado, we'll use an example, at an average of $12 a gram, that's $100, or, $80 to $100 that's off of that dispensary's,
right. It definitely adds up for a small grower. It's not a small sample size, but if you've got 100 pounds, you can definitely sacrifice that for sure. But it adds up for the small grower, and you'll notice all of this stuff as we continue to go adds up against the small grower. And obviously, I don't think that's an accident. But we're not even done with how much this is fucking shit up, because on top of that, we've increased the volume of everything. We've sent it all to the same place. We've decreased the number of people that can do it. So now the dispensaries that want to buy stuff don't have supply for it. They can't even get it. So with the increase in edibles, or the increase in regulation of edibles, so since you're limited to 10 milligrams, you're also running more individual packages. So if I'm a cancer patient and I need 100 milligrams, instead of buying one package of medication, I'm buying 10 packages of medication, which also means that whoever's packaging the medication is having to test 10 times as many packages. So
10 times the tax.
Right. And so, but it's also the test. You also have to test that many more packages. So if you're keeping track, we've somewhere around like quadrupled the amount of testing and reduced the number of places that can do it down to a handful. I don't know how many it is exactly, because it pisses me off to keep track of it too closely, but started with only, I think, 3 testing facilities when it first came around on October 1st. And I think that they expanded it relatively soon after that. But I want to say it's still less than like 20 individual labs for the entire state that have been approved. And so I'll follow up on that and see if there's been any news, since I have gotten discouraged on reading any of it. But that's just the gist of it. So it quadrupled the amount of tests that have to be run overall through various regulations. And then on top of that, reduced the amount of people that can do it. And then you had growing pains for those reduced amount of people, had to get more volume in. And in the meantime, there was thousands of dollars of product that went bad because they weren't able to store it. So, you can just imagine your lettuce having to go through an individual third party and be, I don't know, tested for salmonella or whatever whatever you want to relate to it, and having all of it die before it gets to the market. Do you think you could be able to do business like that?
Yeah, no, it'd be extremely difficult. Yeah. Especially with lettuce, which is something that's a highly perishable product. I mean, even our stuff lasts 3 or 4 weeks properly stored, but still, if you can't get it to market, then it's just rotting.
Right.
Well,
and so, like we said,
example.
dried flour has got a long shelf life, but medications in some situations don't have that long shelf life. It's closer to that 3 to 4 weeks. So, that's where it becomes extremely difficult, and that is the clusterfuck that is Oregon right now, and everybody's just trying to work through getting as many labs as possible out there to be able to run and hopefully be able to do something about the limitations that we have on edibles for really no reason whatsoever. I've yet to have anybody be able to justify any logical reason why it needs to be a 10 milligram limit for medical patients. So I think that that's definitely something that needs to be corrected. But unfortunately, now we've just cloned the same problem in California. So, a lot of people are concerned about that. And I think that, you'll see what used to be really big gray markets. And when I say that, you have the black market, which is totally illegal. You have the white market, which is absolutely legal, and in between you have the gray market, which are people that have some sort of legality but are probably over numbers, overproducing, selling to the black market, all those different things. So we have a big gray market, and that in both Oregon, California, and Washington, I think any legal state, you're going to see that gray market shrink, and you're going to see the black market grow, which we've seen here in Oregon since different legalization changes have came in. Our black market has gotten a lot bigger. I think the last estimation I saw was something like $168 million expansion in the black market in Oregon since legalization. So it's definitely increased the black market and increased the white market. So that automatically means the gray market in the middle is getting squeezed out. And really, in comparison to other parts of the country, the gray market has been really successful for a lot of people around here for a long time. It's been probably, it was functioning fine before we fucked it up for, I want to say, at least 12 years or so here in Oregon. And I think it's been, close to 20 in California? How long is this
96
medical pass? I don't even remember.
20 years this year. In fact, I got a chance to meet Dennis Perrone a couple months ago, who was the original author of that, and I posted some pictures up on the Facebook. He had a seizure a couple years ago, so his ability to talk is there. He's super cognizant. He just has a hard time communicating, which is why he wasn't able to join us on the show. It just takes him a while to get his thoughts out, even though they're very articulate and intelligent. He can't talk very quickly because of his seizure. So it was really wonderful to meet him and get a chance to talk to him and meet one of pretty much the grandfather of the legalization movement. He's the one who drafted and authored the original legalization bill. And it's really incredible to go from that to the just absolute psychotic clusterfuck that Oregon, there's no other word for it. Oregon has been the worst. And you know what was even crazier? When I was working down in Jamaica, Jamaica copy and pasted fucking Oregon's bill. It was completely insane. They wanted to have like webcams on all the grows. That's not going to apply to a guy in the hills of Westmoreland, like 1,500 feet from the. They just why is other parts of the world trying to take some of the like most ridiculous parts of the United States legalization movement and copy and paste it as well? And it's you have other states like Colorado and to a lesser extent Washington State, once they got their act together after the first 6 months, that have really gone a long way. And you know, Oregon's had some really amazing things. Like Oregon and Colorado both have approved pesticide lists on it, and that's what you're allowed to use if it's not on there. And that's something I'd love to see bleed over into the aquaponics realm, is a approved, like USDA approved list of pesticides nationally for aquaponic production that says, hey, none of these have anything that is a carcinogen in the fish or fish toxic, and these are what you're allowed to use for various pests. One, it gives you almost a cheat sheet for stuff to go to if you can't find something that you normally would go to for a problem. And two, it's stuff that's been tested. Now, the stuff for the cannabis stuff is stuff that where they consider combustion. Eagle 20 is a great example. It's perfectly fine to use for produce, perfectly fine to use for fruit trees, but if you burn a thing, it splits the cyanide off and is very, very toxic. And it's one of the things that I'd really like to see the aquaponics movement in general move towards, you know, set approved list of stuff that works. You know, kapow, or to a lesser extent, azadirachtin, meaning, you know, ingredients with the main ingredient azadirachtin, as long as it's not, you know, a heavy cold pressed neem oil, are great for aquaponic. I know, I would imagine, Ken, azadirachtin is one of your main go-tos, Azamax or.
Yeah, Azamax or Azagard. Yeah, that's the main one that we go with. It's a fantastic, works really, really well.
Yeah, that's kind of one of my more last resorts. My main go-to is kapow, but again, both of them work really good. Both of them are heavily approved for every kind of produce you can imagine. Just different ingredients, but it'd be nice to see the aquaponics community move towards a set approved list of that kind of stuff. Along, you know, going back to what we were talking about with the organic certification, it'd be nice to try and formulate and come together with the wider aquaponics community on a set list of approved stuff, or at least improved active ingredients, the same way that it's handled in the cannabis realm, because this is all going to get relevant, especially as both of these industries continue to grow, both aquaponics and the cannabis industry. You know, these are things that are going to come, you know, later down the line. Someone's going to get sued over some liability claim at some point over something stupid, whether or not it's at all factual or at all based on anything that's, you know, whether or not they win or not, it's going to happen at some point. You know what I mean? So it's another way for the industry to help protect itself and say, hey, I was abiding by these guidelines. These have all been previously approved, both for other products and for our industry specifically. And it gives you another layer of protection should it come to a liability type of thing, or in court or whatever else, which doesn't matter for most growers, but it matters for us industry people that are working on a big scale.
I agree.
And it's really incredible to see how Oregon just completely, and this is even the first time this year Oregon's pulled some shit like this. Like there was the whole debacle back, was it February or March, when they pulled concentrates off the market?
Yeah, they basically kind of the same thing, where they limited, I guess not limited, but they required licensing that they didn't have anybody licensed with. So you had to be a licensed concentrate maker or whatever they called it. And yeah, there wasn't any of them out. They they basically fucked up that whole thing in pretty much exactly the same way. So it was, a lot of people think they're just creating vacuums in the otherwise stable market. So in order for corporate interests to be able to move in, and really, all the states, that's what they want. I mean, they want investor money flowing into their state and being able to take advantage of it. And when you have a completely stable market that is full of good product, that is self-regulated already, there's not really a lot of room for them to come in and be able to expand. So a lot of people think that it's not an accident that all of a sudden there was no concentrates that could be purchased by a dispensary for about 30 days or so. And then later that same year, now there's no way that you can buy any product. You can't, that hasn't been tested by basically one of these handful of labs. So that again cuts down on the amount of stuff that you have to purchase and creates a vacuum in the market. So I saw a case study that was done recently, and something like of the 73 different dispensaries that they talked to, it was like 85% of them would buy more product if they could find it, essentially. That there just wasn't enough supply of tested medication to be able to fill what they had previously had on the shelves and were able to move. So pretty much everybody's scaled back what's available. So you used to be able to walk into say Fireside Dispensary here, or House of Leaves, even in Ashland, which is probably one of the bigger ones, even still, where they have a pretty full menu of stuff. You'll see a reduced number of strains, a reduced number of concentrates, reduced number of edibles for sure. That's probably one of the biggest ones that I've seen take a hit, because you have something like 40% of the stuff that even actually gets tested is getting rejected. So, that that becomes difficult to fill orders from all the different dispensaries that want to be able to purchase. It just creates that vacuum, and it just seems a little too fishy to me that they did exactly the same thing twice, and it created a vacuum twice, and now somebody out there somewhere controls who can buy and sell cannabis in Oregon. So that's probably the main issue right now that I think that every dispensary is dealing with, every grower has to deal with. If you're trying to sell your product, we're talking medical, recreational, any of that. Now, if you supply patients directly, then obviously your testing is between you and your patients. But if you want anything to go in a dispensary, it has to be tested at one of the approved dispensaries. And right now, that's just really difficult to get done. Even if you have money and you could probably show up on their doorstep with samples and have to wait in line like DMV. It's definitely not it's not an efficient system right now. And I know they're taking steps to fix it, and hopefully they've gotten something together since I've checked on it last. I would say it's probably been a solid 2 to 2.5 weeks since I've gotten much into it. But that's when that case study came out, which is pretty elaborate. Talked about the increase of the black market. And, like I said, it was well over $100 million expansion this year, which is obviously the opposite of what they predicted with legalization. They'd really hoped that would shrink. But, they came out with a few too many regulations, apparently, and growers just gave them the finger, which doesn't surprise me a bit, because most growers have been giving them the finger for a long time.
Not only that, there's almost an organic tax. Again, going back to the whole total CFUs, that's a bullshit ass thing to test for. Like, they should absolutely, if it comes up above a certain total CFUs, then automatically do the other test. But I shouldn't have to pay twice because I'm a better grower than a guy using chemicals. Like, that's completely fucking asinine. Like, they're literally being taxed because you're a better, more organic grower, which is ridiculous. The other thing I wanted to point out, and Micah back here can speak to firsthand. If any of you are ever charged with butane hash making, you can get that case thrown out, which we just learned recently. The police have zero ability to test for butane in a cannabis product. No lab has the ability to test for that. That's a police lab. They only have the ability to test for cannabis, and they don't have the ability, and they can't prosecute you for, or going back to testing, they also can't test for cannabis or even call it cannabis concentrate in court, which people should also know. unless they also have flower material that they can cross-reference it with. And if you don't have that, they can't even call it cannabis concentrate. Oh, yeah, they'll try. Here, you know what? I'll let Micah speak for a second about it because he can speak better.
Sounds good.
I went through a 51-week nightmare of getting raided by a SWAT team.
Why don't you tell them a whole short story about it?
Whole long story short. Okay, long story short. June 10th, 2014. No, June 10th, 2015. I got raided by a Call of Duty looking SWAT team, helicopter, the whole 9 yards, just after dropping my son off at his middle school. They had some information that they were given by a paid informant that I was growing cannabis in my garage and making concentrates on the back porch, neither of which was true. I had 1.2 grams of cannabis in my pocket. I had a large Rubbermaid tub of trim that I processed butter with for a few terminally ill patients after closing my dispensary. And I mean, they listed it as like 500 grams, but I basically had a pound of butter, 4 sticks in my freezer, and that was it. And I complied with their search warrant after they flashbanged the house and woke all my housemates up at gunpoint, showed them everything I had, and then I showed them 6 years worth of Rex without expiration. And they basically confiscated every Pyrex dish in my house. They were stupefied that there was no lab. I did have 2 blasting tubes locked away in like the chemical closet at the back of the garage where the paint thinner and household cleaning supplies that you don't want kids getting into are. 0 gram, like I didn't have any concentrates. I don't use concentrates. I didn't have any dab rigs or whatever you want to call them. I didn't have nothing to do with any of those. They still charged me with basically the same charge as having a meth lab, which is felony manufacture of a controlled dangerous substance. And then they charged me with felony child endangerment, felony child abuse, basically in hopes of like I'd take a plea deal and just plead guilty to manufacturing, and they dropped the child endangerment shit. And I took it all the way to trial. I wasn't going to give them any plea deal, but it didn't come out until 4 days into trial when the expert witness for the prosecution, the lab technician from the police lab, went on the stand, and we went to cross-examine her, and my attorney said something about my public defender because I couldn't afford an attorney, but they basically asked about, specifically said butane honey oil, and she said I can't call the substance which we encountered butane honey oil. I can only call it concentrated cannabis because we don't have. It's a narcotics lab. They only have the ability to test for the presence of narcotics. Butane's not a narcotic. Neither is hexane or any other gas that people would use to make a concentrate. And as soon as that came up, it was, I mean, in my eyes, it was game over. But that's ultimately what it came down to with the jury too. Is they're charging me with felony manufacture of butane honey oil, or basically a foreign substance, using a foreign substance or a combustible material to process cannabis, and they didn't have the ability to even process for it. But it was 11 months of a nightmare. But ultimately, the knowledge should be out there if anybody gets charged with it. It's pretty much case law now. They can't charge you with felony manufacture of concentrating cannabis with solvents because they don't have the labs themselves that the police only have the ability to test for narcotics and not for butane, not for gases which aren't considered narcotics. So it sucks to go through, but it was like in the long run, probably 100 cases that were pending trial after mine all got dismissed. And recently I just got 3 of my friends who also got illegally raided, their entire cases thrown out, which they were in much more dire circumstances than myself, but just having the knowledge out there to spread, it can save anybody that that might be going through right now. And it was a real eye opener to find out that that's how crazy the system is a SWAT team will kick your door in and charge you with something that you don't even have the ability to test for the presence of, and ultimately in court they made themselves look like idiots, and on the news they called me a cannabis expert, and since then it's just kind of been funny. But if you know anybody in under similar circumstances, or if there are any issues with using solvents or really any type of substance, whether it's CO2 or butane, whatever people are using for concentrates, just know that the police don't have the ability to test for the presence of whatever they're charging you with. And unless they get big budget increases, it's not real feasible that they're going to send off to the same labs that they require us to send ours to for testing to take to market to try and prove you a criminal in court.
Right. And obviously some of these things require fairly elaborate testing like you're talking about. And a lot of times when you're making your extracts, well, Steve will probably attest to this, you shouldn't be able to find butane left over in your extracts as well. So I know they ran into trouble proving a lot of that stuff. So that's great to have that kind of precedent set.
Yeah, in my case, I mean, ultimately the taxpayers paid for it, but my public defender did send the residue which they found, which is I think they scraped 0.06 grams of something off of one of my Pyrex dishes, and there wasn't any presence of butane. But at the same time, that's a dish that was most likely used for baking, and so with the cannabis, butter residue that had probably been baked on there 100 times or something. But
well, it's a good thing they failed chemistry.
Yeah, I had definitely made concentrates before. That's what the blasting tubes are for. But it's something. It was just really ironic that the police are charging me with a crime that, in order to take it to market at my dispensary, when I was involved with, when I had a dispensary, and the same legal test they required me to put it on the shelves, is not something that they pretended they didn't have access to that type of thing, and when they came up with nothing.
Right.
So,
well, I think that definitely speaks to how concerned they are with whether or not they actually have evidence. I mean,
it's all money. They weren't getting. Yeah, fear and money. Biggest life lesson though that I came through with it was definitely the craziest learning experience I've been through in my life. Your right to a speedy trial is a beautiful thing, and if I had it all to do over again, I wouldn't have paid the ridiculous amount of bail. I would have immediately requested my right to a speedy trial within 10 days and just toughed it out in jail, because that's not enough time for them to even write a report. A lazy cop's not going to write a report on a botched raid in 10 days. He's not in that much of a hurry to make himself look like a dick. Out of 14 heavily armed, SWAT team members, there was one cop, the one detective who requested the affidavit for the warrant, was the only person to testify against me. And ultimately his expert witness, his lab technician, is what really made him look stupider. It's December 1st today. He's no longer the head of the Vice Squad in San Diego anymore. He retired yesterday.
Okay.
Because of the embarrassment. So,
well, in a way, it was his, their negligence that allowed you to get this set as a precedent. So that's great.
At a cost of almost $1.2 million for taxpayers.
Well,
they had to spend a lot of money on a helicopter in the air for an hour to come to my house, and a dozen officers that are, top rank, highest paid, and on hazard pay, and then an 11-month trial. It doesn't seem that it's not the America I grew up in anymore. But
definitely don't. Obviously don't discount how many people that's happened to. If it's $1.2 million per instance,
right?
That adds up pretty quick when you think about just the number of people that personally that have been encountered. That's a lot of money.
Yeah,
they came out of our pockets. So we're conservatives that yell about wasted money there. You know what I mean?
Right.
To them, it's just complete lack of principle. I feel like how can you consider yourself conservative while you're literally just pissing money away for no fucking reason? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, regardless of whatever legislation people, I guess the biggest lesson I learned is you begin to feel really safe, and especially at a time when I'd left the industry for 6 months already, that the police are still paying for terrible information and then spending even more money acting on it. And if you end up in that circumstance, insist on a speedy trial for your own sake and the taxpayer's sake, because they'll dismiss it very quickly. But
That's great
one day
advice.
if you have to defend your name in court, it is kind of fun.
How are your kids doing through all that? Everything going good now?
I never even lost custody of my son in family court. Technically, I'm still the full-time parent, although the loss of trust with his mom, really that's been the longest term effect for me is as a parent who's technically the custodial parent. My ex-wife is a beautiful, but not always the smartest person. She asked me why would the police lie? They called her and told her that I had a house full of cocaine, and then didn't want to listen to reason when I'm not charged with anything to do with that. And so I've seen him 3 times in the last year, but we keep in constant contact as much as she'll let him with his smartphone. But it's I'm the custodial parent that's not physically in custody because I don't want to go have a boxing match with my ex-wife's new husband.
Well, that's unfortunate, man.
Yeah. But we're living in. He learned from it as much as I've learned from it, and that's really all you can do. You never should either win or learn. That's really your 2 choices in life. If I can teach you, I'll teach you what I've learned, and most of them I've learned the hard way. So,
Okay, well, hopefully he can be around you a little more often before too long and learn some more. That'd be great. It's unfortunate that our taxpayer money is essentially splitting up a family, basically.
I had a couple of can I use questions I got by email to since the last episode, and I just wanted to pop on those real quick before we start wrapping everything up. We had hold on, I got a little product list here. There's one that I didn't get to this week that I promised you I'll get to. I did try to find it. I just couldn't find a good MSDS sheet or ingredient list, so I can't comment yet. So the first one is Neptune Fish and Kelp. And that product has way too much nitrogen in it and in the wrong form to ever be useful in an aquaponic system. You might be able to get by with it in your soil layer, but that would not be a good product to use. The next one up was Keto Life's Growers Magic. That one is safe to use, and it's one of the higher available silica products on the market. It just gets a little pricey compared to some of the other silica products that are out there. My biggest one I've been going for lately is the Mad Farmer silica. That's kind of been one of my in rotation pH ups because it's potassium silicate, which raises your pH and is totally fish safe unless you really slam it. And it just tends to be a little bit cheap, more cost effective. Next one is Dolomite. Dolomite is great. That's my other pH rotation. Really good. It's calcium magnesium carbonate. It's basically CalMag plus pH up, so it's good for that reason. In fact, Micah has some. I'll show you. It's a white powder. Looks like cocaine or flour. Since we were talking about cocaine earlier, we have a little fun. I swear it's not blow. As he dumps it all over my keyboard.
Snort it.
The next one was Moab, which is a Mad Farmer's product. It's called Mother of All Bloom. That product is not safe because it contains monoammonium phosphate, which is not good for closed loop systems and will build up and cause the ammonium issue. It causes issues. You're adding nitrogen at the same time. The other one was Shine, which I forget. Hold on. I have the ingredients list here. Give me 2 seconds. It is monopotassium phosphate, potassium sulfate, magnesium sulfate. That product would also be good, but I'll be honest with you, for $40, you could buy enough powder to make that product for, I don't know, way more than what's in that bottle. So I don't know. I would tell you just go get those ingredients and do it yourself. It's way cheaper to buy those powders than it is to just buy a bottled product. But that is a Shine. Bloom is the other one that is safe to use. But again, you're going to pay about 1/10 as much if you just made it. with the powders. Did any we'll wrap things up here. Did Tony, did you want to plug anything before we wrap up? Any events or anything coming up?
I just wanted to say thank you for letting me be a part and ask a couple questions. I learned a lot, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with Steve in the future here at Eden. We're going to be hosting some workshops at the next couple of events. We have an event coming up the 16th through the 18th called Cloud Walker. It's actually going to be the event where Steven will be giving a couple different seminars, a couple different workshops, some intro classes into aquaponics, and be talking kind of on introductory levels regarding some of the same subject matter that's been discussed here tonight, but not as much detail. But it will be to a demographic that's very much eager to learn about this, and as Ken said earlier, is very much demanding to know where the food is coming from and really wanting to be a part of the local process in terms of connecting with where the food is growing from and how they can be a part of that production. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you guys all for listening while I ranted on. Thank you for answering the questions. Ken learned a host of information, and as someone that's trying to get more into the commercial growth and same type of thing, farm to fork. I appreciate your time.
Would you like to go ahead and talk about what you have coming up aside from the cannabis class on the 20th and 21st there, Ken?
Yeah, certainly. And I also want to say thank you very much for all of you as well. One of the great things about aquaponics is there's so much information out there, and anytime we interact, I always learn something. So it's always a learning experience for everything. So I appreciate the conversations we've all had tonight, and I appreciate the questions as well. Yeah, for stuff coming up, we do have a tour at our facility coming up this Saturday. I don't know if anybody finds themselves in the Bay Area, come by Saturday morning at 10 o'clock and get a full-scale tour of our farm. Lasts about 2 hours, and you can see how everything works. We do those the first Saturday of every month as well. And then the next class we have coming up, aside from the cannabis class we're doing, is in February, the 3-day commercial level class. So if you're interested in getting into aquaponics on a commercial level, this will provide you everything that you would need for that. And yeah, just my recommendation is just get into it, start doing it, and learn as much as you can, and share everything you can with people, because we all have valuable information. We all come from different experiences. We're all growing in different environments with different fish in different climates, and the more knowledge that we can share amongst ourselves, the better and the stronger the entire industry and this methodology will grow. And the ability to really spread the word about aquaponics and cannabis production and the purity of the food and the purity of our product and the purity of our medicine, I think is something that we all need to work for going into the future. So again, I thank you really very much for the opportunity to be here and to talk to you all today.
Thanks. And what's the dates on that commercial class coming up?
Okay, so the commercial class is, I believe it's the 17th through the 19th of February. So it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The class is $9.95 for the 3 days, includes lunch all days and coffee and tea and all that kind of stuff. So it's 3 full days. Really going to get into it. There are going to be spreadsheets. There's going to be business plans. There's going to be integrated pest management, seeding, planting, harvesting. There'll be a combination. Morning time is going to be classwork in the classroom with PowerPoint presentations. The afternoon time is going to be hands-on in the farm. So
that's wonderful. Awesome. Thanks again for taking the time to join us today. It really means a lot, and I really appreciate it.
Yep, no, it's totally my pleasure. I'm again learned a whole bunch of stuff, and really great connecting with some additional people in the industry. It's always exciting. When we started 5 years ago, nobody knew what aquaponics was, and now it seems like everybody that comes through the door that I run into has at least heard about it. So it's great. The wave is still building. This industry is still in its infancy to a certain degree, and there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity. And we are the ones that are changing the world by living this way. So get out there and do right by the planet, and do right by what's good for all of us.
And if you guys would like to learn more about his farm and what they do, Check them out at ouroborosfarms.com, aquaponicfarmingcourse.com, and aquachronic.com. And you can check out my information as always. Questions, comments about the show or the podcast, potentponics@gmail.com. Our website's potentponics. You all already know what I do from listening in previous casts. Marty, also our Facebook group is aquaponic cannabis growers. Feel free to join. We keep it private just so that if you post something on there, you don't have to worry about your mom seeing it or whatever. That has been an issue in the past with some people. So we do have it on a private or closed group, so you don't have to worry about other people seeing that you're into it. Yeah, Marty, why don't you plug your stuff?
Yeah, well, I got obviously a lot of stuff coming up. We're gonna have the first probably tour of the farm will go up probably like I would say probably like the week of the 12th or so of December. So that'll be coming up here in the next couple of weeks. And, all the stuff that we work on will essentially be, for like all of our mothers and cloning operation and breeding and all that stuff is all going to be in aquaponics. And then we'll have it essentially decoupled grow for flowering that will sort of be a hybrid. We'll be making all of our teas and stuff with a base of tank water, and then setting up some different crops that will grow that will then also feed to our worms. So different things like comfrey and horsetail tea, so that we'll grow those things sort of in between our Christmas trees and enhance those things that are already there as well. So we're going to decommission some of the things that they do that are sort of from that commercial grow space now, and sort of bring them into a more positive, beneficial runoff, sort of probiotic level for not just our Christmas trees, but the existing Christmas trees as well. So that's going to be really exciting. And then, eventually we'll be setting up all top of the line LEDs to be able to keep our electricity costs down. So we'll be building our own compost bins and worm bins, and sort of putting up a lot of different information probably up over the next 3 months or so. So we're looking at flowering probably running, I would say tentatively by like the mid-March or so. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But we're looking at overhauling a greenhouse, rebuilding a shop. It's all going to get stripped out and rebuilt to our specifications. So it'll be pretty exciting to get all that and try to film updates on all that stuff. So that's sort of the whirlwind that I'm in at the moment.
Always call for reinforcements, as long as it's not very long.
That's right.
We'll happily come and make the
I don't know how
drive,
you
pick
stay
some
in a
crap
place
up
long
and
enough
go.
to grow any plants. How does that ever happen? I mean,
Well,
I
that's
know it
nice
does
thing
at some
about-
point, but it seems like
Yeah, that's the nice thing about having a home base finally. Well, what happened was I went to Jamaica, and when I went to Jamaica, I really should have gotten rid of my apartment then, because I kept paying for an apartment for like 4 or 5, like it was like 5 or 6 months that I like never saw. So I was like, why am I paying just to like remotely have a grow that I don't even get to smoke the weed from? Like,
if
just
you
giving
just
it
want to
my
pay somebody's
close
mortgage,
friend
man,
who's-
you can pay mine, and you can come smoke anytime you want. We'll call it even.
Because I was just helping supply a friend of mine that was really in medical need at the time, and I did that, and then finally I was just like, this is like a huge hole in my pocket that I don't need to pay right now. Like, I'm traveling all the time for doing these different consulting jobs. Like, why do I need to have an apartment? But now that I have a place where I have multiple properties nearby where I can get my bigger commercial clients all set up, I can have a real short commute or walking commute, or very, very short, and then have a really dope home base where we can do all kinds of other both cannabis and non-cannabis aquaponic setups and education, and not only gardening. There's a bunch of art stuff here, and they're looking to do metalworking classes and all kinds of other cool stuff. It's just a really amazing. It's like living at Burning Man or something like that. It's really dope. So yeah,
Cool.
yeah. for sure.
So definitely look forward for all that stuff on my channel, which is AP Meds. Steve's on Ponics. We're on Aquaponic Cannabis Growers Group, which I'm proud of Steve. I think this is episode 25. I believe that's the first time he's remembered to plug our Facebook group. So good job, Steve.
That's
But,
well, it's technically episode 24. We like skipped one of them.
Oh,
So
that's
at some
right.
Point,
I forgot about
I
that.
figured at some point between like 50 and 100, we'll do like the lost episode.
Yeah, there you go. That sounds good. I like that. So I think that's pretty much all of our social media. But stay tuned for announcement. We'll probably launch social media for the farm itself once we get it named and branded and all of our paperwork in place. So we'll definitely have that coming out. And yeah, so lots of fun there. You guys have anything else?
Nope. No. One last thing, I do have a beginner and intermediate level class happening the second weekend in January. So I forgot, the weekend before the cannabis class with Steve, I have both a Saturday beginner course and then a Sunday intermediate course, the 14th and 15th of January. So
it looks like Carly here asks, where do we sign up for Ken's class?
Oh, you can go to if you go to our website, go to ouroborosfarms.com, and then there's the classes page, and then they'll have a link to a square up place where you can sign up. You can also, if you want any additional information, you always email me at ken@ouroborosfarms.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Steve, can you throw a link in the chat to that one?
Yeah.
Oh, it's already there. Look at that.
There's if you look at the in the description of the video of the stream, and then if you're watching this as a YouTube later on, there's a link directly to his website already in there, but I just pasted it in the chat as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Yeah, thanks Ken for everyone. Being our guest tonight, answering all of our questions, putting up with our rants.
No, it was my pleasure. It's really interesting to see a different, people that share the same love and are growing just a slightly different type of plant and the issues that are surrounded that. So it's super informative for me as well. And we're all growing with fishes.
Sounds good. All right, guys, you have a good night. It was nice to meet you guys too. Thanks for joining us and elaborating, especially you, man, who's had so much issues. And being able to get something on the board for the rest of us, thank you for your sacrifice and all that.
Thank you guys for having me again. This is my second time on here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a real honor.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys, for watching, and have a good one, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks. Have a great night.